guys, welcome back to the Why We Disney podcast. Thank you once again for joining us. We have such a special episode prepared. We are going to be celebrating another birthday this month. If you don't know who it is the man behind all of our magic, the man behind all of the dreams that come true every day. We are celebrating Walt's birthday month. So Walt Disney, we're so excited. We contribute this episode to you. Thank you for all that you've done. And obviously, we're going to just celebrate your life today. Let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. We hope you guys enjoy.
What is up, Why We Disney family? My name is Kara, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Kaycee.
Hello, everyone.
So we are so happy that it's Why We Disney Wednesday. It is Walt Disney Wednesday. We are going to be celebrating the man himself, the creator of the Disney franchise, Walt Disney. But first, before we even get into the history, this episode is going to be for the history buffs, of course. But before we even get into all of that, I just want to give credit where credit's due. Kaycee kind of came up with this, describing Walt in one word or phrase. So Kaycee, could you go ahead and start? How would you describe Walt Disney?
Yes. Oh my gosh. If I could describe this man and his life just in one word, it would be visionary. And I wanted to even look up what visionary meant in the dictionary. And this is thinking about or planning the future with imagination and wisdom. And I think, does that not fit just who he is as a whole? He was so before his time, right? So that's my one word I could describe for Walt Disney is visionary. Kara, what's yours?
You would think that visionary was a word made by Disney.
Right.
I'm going to be honest to our listeners here. On our script, I put dreamer. Just because when you think Walt Disney, you think about a child. You think about this person who wants to build a community to take his family and all these stories, and he was such a storyteller. So that was the first word that came to mind. But I'm going to change my answer to Imagineer. Because when you think about an Imagineer, it is someone that is creating, and they are just bringing these different stories to life, and it takes so much science behind it. So people think Disney is just just the parks and it magically pops up. No, there's so much planning involved, and it takes a special someone to think about all of that. So I like the Imagineer word that Disney came up with. So I'm going to stick with Imagineer on that one.
I love it so much. And we want to hear your one word that you would describe for Walt Disney. So the day that this episode comes out, we're going to post on our Instagram, probably in our Instagram stories, I would say. And we want you guys, if you could describe Walt Disney in one word, what would that be? And you can even tell us why. And we're going to reshare and make sure that just gets out there. But I really think there's so many awesome words that could describe him. And I'm really excited to talk about his life. Isn't it fun?
I feel like everyone needs to either get a pen and paper out or just sit on your couch and just relax, because what Kaycee and I are going to do is go through a very detailed just history of his life. And it's fascinating, all the things that happen, and you don't want to miss any of the moments.
Yeah, for sure. And one just quick disclaimer I want to say that we're not going to be breaking down his life year by year, because if we did that, Kara and I would literally be on this episode for 2 hours. No doubt. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of move through and just pick out the important things of his life, the things that we felt like really, really touched on his character and who he was as a person and as a child and as a teenager growing up. So I'm really excited, but just to let you know, and I'm going to go ahead and give this disclaimer now, that if you want to actually watch Walt Disney's full documentary, you can do that on YouTube. It's about 2 hours long, and you just search Walt Disney's documentary or biography or whatever, and it will be the first thing that pops up. But just to let you know, you have to be committed. I watched it over the amount of 3 days. But yes, that would be really cool if you're super into the history of who he was and you want to know through the years every single detail. I highly recommend you doing that on YouTube. Cool?
Sounds good.
All right, we ready to get started? So guys, before all the fame, right? Before the Disney parks and before he became a well-known name all over the world. I don't know if there's many people in the world who don't know who Walt Disney is. I would be shocked if I met someone who had no idea who he was, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk about the beginning. So Walt was actually born in Chicago, Illinois on December 5th, 1901. He had 4 siblings, 3 older brothers, and a younger sister named Ruth. I will go ahead and mention their names too. I think that's beneficial. So Herbert was the oldest, and then Raymond, and then Roy, and then it was Walt, and then his younger sister, Ruth. So there's the nice little family tree, born in Chicago, Illinois. Okay, so his family moved to Missouri when Walt was young, and they lived on a farm, which, like, the farm life is not for everyone, I want to say. It's just not. And I wouldn't think it would be for Walt, but I want to mention, too, his very first job ever, which I feel like if you're over the age of 70, your first job is always the same thing. So his first job was actually a paper route. Which is really cool. He did it actually when he was super young with his brothers. It was something that they were able to do together. And around the age of 5, so think about how young 5 Walt was, he started to draw. And believe it or not, Kara, he was not good at it. Like, he was criticized and made fun of. They're like, dude, you cannot, this is not good stuff. But through all of the criticism, right, he continued to pursue anyway, and he continued to work on his art and really tried to pursue that career, even as a 5-year-old child. Isn't that just crazy?
I mean, yeah, I could go off on a tangent right now, but look, we got to continue. So sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So Walt moved actually back to Chicago to actually pursue his art when he was 15 years old. So he skipped about 10 years of his life there, but he's still just such a young man, doesn't even know who he is yet, but he just knows that he loves to draw, and that's something that he's passionate about. So moving back to Chicago from Missouri. So Walt was 16 at the time, and he wanted to join the military. It was the thing. Everyone, all of his buddies were joining military, but unfortunately he was too young. He could not officially join. So what he did, which I have a funny story to tell after this, but what he did was he actually changed his birthday on his application and was able to join the Red Cross unit. So essentially what he was doing for the U.S. military is he was driving trucks, driving supplies back and forth from base to base. That was kind of his job because he was too young essentially to do anything else. But I just think it's funny how often this happened back then, because my great grandmother actually changed her birthday on her birth certificate, or smudge the numbers so she can work as a 12-year-old girl.
What about schools? Out here, okay.
I know. And it was such a thing when she was like 90 years old, because we never knew when her actual birthday was. Like, it was the craziest thing.
I was about to say, is everyone's ancestry going to be lying then?
Right. I just think it's crazy how common that was and how easy that was. I feel like now if you tried to do that, they'd be like, no. I need all kinds of form of proof.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So after he was in the Red Cross unit, this was obviously coming down to the end of World War I. So Walt, and I want to mention this too, because Walt had actually picked up smoking during his time in the U.S. Army when he was 15, 16 years old. And I wanted to mention that too, just because smoking is one of the things that kind of developed in his health issues that ended up ending his life later on. So I thought that was pertinent to mention that that's when he started smoking, is around age 15 or 16. Very, very young. Okay, so fast forward to 1919, World War I is over, and he returned home back to Chicago. So Walt started his own animation film company at the time when he moved back in 1919. So he would do short black and white cartoon films, and he would draw and he would write the storyline. So he was barely making a living doing this. Y'all hear all the time how Walt was homeless. And the documentary talked about how it wasn't uncommon for him to just have one meal a day, if he could even have one meal a day, but he just seriously could not afford to live anywhere or get even a 3 meal a day life, right? That's just It just seems crazy for a man like Walt Disney, because we all know who he is and we all know of his success, right? So once he started that company, he actually started on the side selling short stories that he created, and they were called laugh-o-grams. And laugh-o-grams actually went out of business shortly after a year before he started that. And he decided to move to Hollywood after that. He's like, listen, this is not working in this small town. I need to head to Hollywood, because where all the producers are, where all the movies are being made, where all the creative minds move, I need to move to Hollywood. So him and his older brother, Roy, moved to Hollywood and actually try to pursue this. And I want to point out just in this time how often you're going to see Walt failing, right? Walt will constantly fail even in this same industry, but it truly speaks to his character how often he gets back up and is like, no, I'm not going to fail. I'm going to try to pursue this even if I'm not good at it, or if people tell me I can't, I'm going to keep pushing this, right?
And also, I just want to mention right there how he continued to move and change and research what would be best for his dream. He was like, okay, I need to go out to Chicago. Okay, I need to go out to Hollywood. Like, he wasn't just making these decisions willy-nilly. He was figuring out what was best for his business. So this is everyone's, time to become an entrepreneur and do you.
Absolutely. And how often do we try things and fail and are like, oh, well, it's not for me. Yep. It's too often we do that. So let's keep moving on with the story. Okay, so when he moved to Hollywood, he went to every single studio in town, and he was actually rejected by all of them. Every single one of them. Not one of them took his artwork. Not one of them took his short stories that he created, his portfolio. He presented it to every single one of them, and they were like, no, I'm not feeling what you're bringing, man. Sorry. So after that, him and Roy actually decided to create or start their own cartoon studio in Hollywood. And it was the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. And they sold their cartoons and stories. And in the background of the business, Walt was writing and producing Alice in Wonderland, like we know today. And I thought it was really cool to mention this. So Alice in Wonderland originally, everything in the movie was animated, everything, but the little girl. She was the only live action part of that whole movie. And they called Walt crazy. They're like, Walt, you are going to have so much trouble getting animated characters and then a live action. Like, no one's ever done this before. Like, you're crazy. It's going to be way too hard. You're going to burn out. There's no way it's going to happen. Little did they know, Alice in Wonderland came out and it was a huge success. But it also points to like, hey, I'm going to listen. I have this idea in my mind and I'm not going to stop until it comes to light, right? Crazy, crazy. So, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying it's the absolute beginning. And Brandon, if the listeners don't know, who's my best friend, is actually putting on a production, the theater version of Alice, which is streaming on December 10th. I know this episode is coming out after that, but you can always donate if you want to. It's the reason I bring it up is because my classroom theme this year is finding the magic in music, right? So we're using Disney to show time periods and show genres and do all this stuff. And I'm like, literally, Alice in Wonderland is so far back in time. You guys have no idea. And they're like, oh, I thought it was in the 90s. No, like they're not putting time perception into it. So it's nice to see how far these things literally started.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, eventually, guys, moving on in this story, Universal Studios, of all people, how funny. Universal Studios actually bought some of Walt's cartoons and his small stories. Okay. And this was the very first sight of success in Walt's career. The very first, when finally a major production company bought their cartoons and bought his short stories. And this was in 19. Oh, I thought I had the date in here. Darn. This was around 1923. So imagine from the time he was 5 years old to 1923, how many times he's had to fail to actually finally see some success in this. I mean, how long would you pursue that until you would quit? I don't know. Apparently he didn't quit. So in 1928, He created a brand new character that we all know and love. And actually, this was the turning point in his career when he created the Mickey Mouse, right? And I also want to point out, if you haven't listened to the episode of the Why We Disney podcast where Kara and I celebrated Mickey Mouse's birthday, that's episode 52. If you guys want to go back and listen to that, we talk about the history of Mickey. We talk about Walt a little bit and how you can celebrate with Mickey at home. So I want to point out that episode. If you haven't checked that out yet, head back over to episode 52 and check that out. But this is the turning point in his career. This is when it all starts to take off. And before we start to take off, we're going to do a really quick ad break before we do so. You guys don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
All right, everyone, we are back from the ad break. Thank you so much, Kaycee, for going over his early stage of life. We're going to get into kind of the next portion. This is that, I would say, the businessman portion, when he started to become popular before the parks were even a thing. Before. So where do we start? Well, you kind of left off as Mickey Mouse, but right. Just before Mickey made an appearance in making the Disney family, the royal family that they are today, he actually married his wife, Lillian, which is just adorable. You can see pictures of them everywhere in the parks. But also important to note that Walt won his second Oscar for Best Animated Short Film, and this is actually for Alice in Wonderland. So I don't know, maybe this is inspiring me to go watch Alice in Wonderland again. I don't know about you.
Yes.
And
same.
Yes, during this time, Walt and Lillian had two daughters. The first is Diane, and she was born in 1933. And then the second, they adopted Sharon in 1936. So not only is he becoming this visionary, becoming this businessman, but he's also becoming a father and this family figure. And he loved being a dad. He loved spending time with his kids. He was so eager to get home to actually be with his family in Los Angeles when he was producing and doing all the things that he was doing. So he kind of pulled back on his business. He stopped drawing as often, and he hired a team to help him draw and produce the films. And I want to really state this. I think this was so good for his mental health too. Like we're talking about the podcast, and we bring people in to kind of help it grow. And I think he realized, okay, I need more people on my team to help this whole production grow, which is great. But Walt brought them in as drawers and artists, but he wanted to focus on the storytelling, which we all think is where he thrives the most, right? So this kind of allowed him to be more creative, and he could bring in inspiration from watching his kids, which I think is just so 360 of the whole thing. Like at first you're just sitting there drawing, and as a child, and now you're watching your kids pulling that inspiration. Oh, tear.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're talking about his job. If y'all heard anything about Walt Disney as a boss, he is said to be a very tough employer. Yeah, I hear that he did not praise his team like at all. Apparently, he would speak highly of them, but rarely ever give them like a congratulatory or like a thank you. So he was pretty harsh. I don't know. How would you react in that circumstance?
So I want to say that like my grandfather owned restaurants his entire life, and he was like, his employees loved him, but he was also very tough on them. Like I don't know, like they had he had this presence about him that just like when he walked into a room, like everyone kind of got a little tense and they knew that he was in charge. And when I was watching the documentary, I could imagine that this is how his team felt, that like, and apparently like he would shoot down ideas like really quickly if he didn't like them. It wasn't like, well, wait, Walt, like, let me try to convince you. He's like, no, scratch it, move on. Like there's a better idea that you can give me. And that's a hard employer to have sometimes. Like I could imagine. I don't know if I have, but
What's her name from the Cruella movie? That's who, like, if Walt was the boss, I could imagine that, like, nope, new color, do it again.
Yes. But I feel like just business men from that time, they had this presence about them that, like, look, I control this room, you know?
Well, Walt was going to do what Walt was going to do. And even if that's going against his brother's judgment, right? So he spent nearly his entire family fortune on the production of Snow White, which, you know, they almost lost their home in Los Angeles because of this, because he was like literally putting out so much money. And in 1937, Snow White premiered, and luckily it was a huge success. If you watch any of the trailers from back then, you can see Snow White and they had the characters and it was so cute, which is really good because then his brother Roy was able to go and pay off all the debt that Walt put them in. And they were trying to pay off the personal loans that they took out and all of this. So it's very good that Snow White was a success.
Yeah. Could you imagine, Kara, the conversations between the two brothers? He's like, Walt's like, I need more money. And Roy is like, you don't understand. There is no more money.
And I just can't believe, like, think about that. If Snow White wasn't successful, would the Disney productions still be here?
Wow. That's crazy to think about. I don't know.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know. That is that's kind of crazy to think about. Maybe we all need to appreciate Snow White a little bit more.
We do. I feel like I should go watch it again.
But so since the production went so well and it was such a huge success, the family was able to get back on their feet, kind of get their grounds moving, and Walt wasted no time working on his newest project, which of course is going to be Disneyland.
Ooh. Let's talk about Disneyland. It's such a fun topic that we love to talk about on the podcast, just because there is so much of Walt at Disneyland out in California. And I don't know, like I always try to think about like Disney World, because Kara and I go to Disney World all the time. And I'm like, what would be different? I always think about that. What would be different? But let's talk about the inspiration for Disneyland, right? Because how did he get inspired? Like, how did he just have this idea from birth? No, that's not what happened. So let's talk about how he got inspired for Disneyland. This is really interesting. And if you're a parent, you will totally understand this, I'm sure. But so every Saturday, Walt would actually take his two girls, Diane and Sharon, to a local park, and it had a huge carousel. And so what Walt would do is he would sit on a bench and he would eat peanuts and he would watch his daughters play on this carousel, and they would get off and then they would walk right back on and get off and walk right back on. And so Walt would sit on this bench and he would just imagine if there could ever be a place where people like could have where families would be able to have fun together. So like the parents get on the rides and the grandparents are able to go. And he immediately had this vision of what a place could possibly look like, that where families could have fun together. And this was the foundation of his dream. And I just want to say, so carnivals and fairs, apparently theme parks at the time were not popular at all. Like they were very dirty. The people, the employees that worked there were very rude. They barely interacted with the guests at all. And so this was kind of the idea that Walt wanted to change. So there was actually a piece of property that went up for sale across the street from Walt's studio out in California. And Walt had this idea of a park, and not a theme park per se, but just a large place, a large piece of property with a train that circled around the entire property. And he would have like a carousel and swings and jungle gyms, just kind of like a regular park where you would take like your kids on Saturdays, right? So not theme park per se. But so he actually took this proposal to the county and presented it to them. So he was so excited about it. He made this whole presentation and they rejected it almost immediately. Again, what happens when Walt fails? What happens?
Just does it again.
He's just going to get back up and he's going to be like, okay, well, if I can't have it here, then we'll find it somewhere else. So, but the reason why they actually rejected his offer or his idea was because the city at the time did not want to be overrun by like the carnival crowds and stuff. But again, what happens when Walt fails? He's just going to do it somewhere else. He's like, okay, well, you tell me no, then I'll go find someone who says yes, which is exactly what he did. So his dream was actually to build a center playground for the families of America. And that was his quote, actually, families of America. But little did he know that people would be traveling from all over the world to visit this place. And I can't even imagine what he would say, right, if he knew that Disneyland is in Hong Kong or Paris. Like, I can't imagine what he would think. So not only just the families of America, but literally the families from around the entire world. So leading up to that, what happens next, right? After he was rejected, he actually started a company called WED. And if you've ever seen the Imagineering story, you will actually hear the word WED a lot. But what it stands for is Walter Elias Disney. So this was the beginning design center of Disneyland. And this was Walt's playground. He would work almost all day at the studio with Roy, and then he would go work at WED, which was just a small studio, but it was his playtime. It was his favorite time that he would go, and his mind was able just to be creative, and he didn't have any boundaries at WED, right? He was able just to do whatever he wanted, imagine however he wanted. And like I said, if you've ever watched the Imagineering series, this is actually where Imagineers were birthed, is at WED. So we're talking about Disneyland. Let's talk about the opening day of Disneyland. What the heck happened? How did it come to be?
Should we talk about it?
Should we talk about it? I don't know if we should.
Because, there was the creation of WED, and then after a full year of this like rigorous construction and very quick construction, by the way, it was a total investment of like $17 million. It finally opened. The guards opened up the gates on a fabulous Sunday morning, July 17th, 1955. And while it was glorious, Walt again had to spend a large portion of his family fortune to get this project done. Was it a success? Well, of course it was. People traveled far and wide. But the opening day of Disneyland is said to be described as, one could say, a complete and utter disaster. We're talking like people's shoes sticking to the macadam because it wasn't set the whole way, like things not working properly. But it didn't stop people from coming. He's been talking about this for how long? It was on the media, so people came far and wide. And obviously it was running, it was going, and Walt was like, why stop here? He turned his attention to Epcot, a community of tomorrow, right? This was going to be his next project, his next vision. And he wanted to open another park in the Sunshine State of Florida. So like coast to coast, everyone was going to see the mouse, right? So Walt and his team purchased this like 27,000 acres of swampland in Florida. And this was like his vision for Epcot to kind of be the centerpiece of it, to kind of, go out and about. And so, they started this, and this is about, Walt in his 60s. So when he was 62, Walt's health started to become a concern. And this is when you talked about him starting to smoke all the way back when he was 15. This is after he won 13 Academy Awards, was a very, popular and respected man. He started to interview that he had no intention of retiring or slowing down, even with all of the health issues going on. And then his doctor had a concern about a lump on his liver, I believe. Yes, it was liver. And after several tests, they unfortunately confirmed that it was cancerous. Right. And they gave him a prognosis of 6 months max to live. Yeah. I don't even know, like, I don't think there's a person in today's time except for like Betty White. You know what I mean? Like a celebrity that, like, if I heard the news, I would be like, but no, they could never leave us.
Right.
I mean, everyone. I don't want anyone to leave. Let's all live forever. But yeah. So
no, but wouldn't you say like he had so much more to do? Like there was just, he had, like if we had him for 15 more years, what he could have created.
Yeah. I don't know. But so during this time, he was not actively working in Orlando, but he was still, brainstorming the thoughts of what would be the Disney World project and Epcot in Florida. And unfortunately, on December 15th of 1966, right after his 65th birthday, Walt Disney passed of multiple health issues. Yeah. So very, very unfortunate, very before his time to go. That, yeah, too much to say there. But so what happened was his older brother, Roy, planned to retire in the 1960s. But after Walt's passing, he was like, oh, I should probably head this whole Florida project. Then on a magical day of October 1st, 1971, Magic Kingdom and Disney World came to life. And then Roy died 2 months later.
Right.
So we're just having this roller coaster with the Walt Disney family, I would say. Walt was interviewed 1.5 years before he died, and he was asking if he could go back and do it all over again. And his response was, I would not change a thing. Walt Disney wouldn't change anything about his life. And I think that's just amazing, because some of us are like, oh, I wish I could go back to high school. I wish I could do this. But like, your story is your story, and it made you who you are. So he even recognized that way back when. And I just think it's a truly inspirational story, like his whole legacy. And if he was here today and could see Walt Disney World and, like you were saying, Hong Kong Disney and Disneyland Paris, like, what would he even say?
Oh my gosh.
From Captain America's Ice Cube, like what would he say?
Oh my gosh, it's so hard to say. I would hope that he wouldn't be disappointed with the direction that they've taken Disney at all. I know that as of now, the family does not own Disney, the Walt Disney family, that they've since sold it years ago. And so I don't know, like I do wonder this. What do you think he would say, Kara? Would he be disappointed?
Because I think a lot of people think they know what he would say.
Right.
On social media, like, Walt would never approve of this and blah, blah, blah. And as much as I agree with some of those statements, it's like, you never know. Yeah. I know, because he was constantly changing, and in like the movie, he kept moving forward. And so like, he was just all about evolving and all about changing and seeing what was best for his family and the community. So I have no idea how Walt would feel.
I'd love to know.
With all the money.
That's true. I'd really love to know that, but we'll never know. And I think that's okay. Where I'm happy with where Disney stands right now, and it is surely bringing magic to a lot of people. So we'll rejoice in that.
And I know that this episode is just kind of a synopsis of his history and life. And I know some of us can't get to the parks as regularly as we would want to, but if you want more information about this, Kaycee and I really thought it was important to highlight some things on Disney Plus that you could go and continue these conversations and continue your education about this and kind of dive deep into what Walt Disney did. First of all, not only for the Disney community, like, amusement parks and hotels and resorts were made because of Disney, and so many other things in our everyday life were made because of what he started. So if you want a little bit more information, we have a couple things on Disney Plus that you do not want to miss. First is the Imagineering story, specifically episodes 1 and 2. This is highly recommended by our team because it just really starts off from the beginning. Kaycee, what would you say?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it really grabs like a sense of who he was without going through the entire details like Kara and I just did. I think it's very beneficial. Even if you just watch episodes 1 and 2, you really grasp Disney behind the scenes,
Yeah. There's also the pre-opening report from Disney, the story of animated drawing. I'm going to say that I started this one and never finished it. Now looking at my script, I got to go back and rewatch it. This is kind of Walt Disney discussing the history of animation. So I don't know, how cool. And then lastly, we have Adventure Through the Walt Disney Archives, which was actually just released on November 19th. So that's a new one. You have to add that to your watch list.
Yeah, for sure. Haven't got to see these yet. But wow, this is such a cool episode. And for you history buffs out there, I think this is really cool. I'm glad Kara gave those resources. If you want to do the deep dive, we recommend it. Kara and I enjoyed writing the script. We enjoyed learning about Walt and who he was and who he could have been. There's so many things that are endless, but we want to just pay tribute to his birthday month, which is the month of December, right? I'm right. That's right. But so happy birthday, Walt Disney. You have brought so much joy to so many people. And I know Kara and I, heck, where would we be right now? We wouldn't be doing this podcast if it wasn't for him. So awesome. Guys, thank you once again for joining the Why We Disney podcast, and make sure that you're following along on all of our social media, everything that we do. We are very active on Instagram and Facebook. We also have a TikTok that's really fun. We have a Patreon that just released. If you want kind of exclusives into the Why We Disney podcast, that Patreon is a really cool way to just get to know us better and get to see some behind the scenes stuff, which is really cool. We're very proud of our team and, everything that's going on with that. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. And as always, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Kara, do you have anything else for the listeners?
Thank you to this person who left us a review. If you want to be featured on one of our episodes, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And we would just love to hear what you guys think.
Absolutely. Well, we love you guys. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you have a great week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.